Welcome to the show. I'm Edwin Ampel, Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Skull AI. And today we've got Ross Leacy joining us here, who's been reshaping education from the inside out. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for inviting me on the podcast. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, it's a pleasure having you here. So for those who don't know you, how would you summarize what you do and why you do it?
First and foremost, I'm a teacher. I'm an educator. I'm a learner. I started out in actually civil engineering was my original path, and probably due to my granddad with the many stories that he used to tell me. He actually worked in Bahrain for a while, and that's kind of my pursuit. I was always involved in technology and figuring out how things worked. So with that, then I really wanted to transition into education, technology education more specifically. So I did obviously my degree in Ireland and got into education that way. It's always a passion of mine, really. It's something that someone who's always sought out to see if I can help people improve or teach them ways of doing something that maybe they found difficult at a certain time.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. And we're starting to actually see now more and more people transitioning into education from their previous careers. So specifically in the engineering and tech sector, we've got more and more people transitioning over into education now because, like yourself, they want to give back and they really want to give that real world experience to the students.
Yeah, it's a very important area as well. And being in the UAE in general, it's very at the forefront of that side of it. When I was working with the Ministry of Education, we were involved in a teacher training program where we actually were training people who had come from those professions, computer science backgrounds, mechanical, electrical engineering, and they were bringing that different aspect that we hadn't seen, obviously, inside in the classrooms. We obviously had to try and create a program that developed their pedagogy or the pedagogical skills as well with that, and kind of pairing that together with the background experience or their industrial experience that they would have had, which definitely brought a unique kind of aspect to the education.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And would you say that it's more beneficial to have teachers coming from previous backgrounds into education to share those real world skills?
It's a good question. Honestly, it can help, and I think that there's definitely room for a partnership or even something within schools that either lends itself to bring in industrial leaders or bring in that aspect to a school. Obviously, the core part of being a teacher is that pedagogy, is the ability to take difficult information and make it more understandable, break it down into bite size and be able to, and if they still don't understand it, then be able to kind of reform it into a different way so that, they're able to really bite their teeth into it.
Yeah, exactly. And I completely agree with you. Having that ability to break down the complex topics into simple ideas is so important because it really helps students get that foundational knowledge which they can then apply into other subjects and lessons. And then also, we previously spoke at an event and you mentioned that you're now starting something called stream education within the school. Could you go further into what stream education exactly is?
Sure. Initially, it was STEM education was the kind of the coined phrase, and it was actually there was a discussion all the time about women in STEM fields in general was significantly lower than the male counterparts. And it was actually a woman who came up, it was a biologist, and she came up with the term STEM. It's now had a few different versions of itself. So stream is the new latest one, but it's a vital aspect inside in the schools, and I'm finding it that it's a growing area, especially in the UAE currently. There's a lot of workshops and obviously conferences surrounding that specific space. So I was asked basically when I was working in Dubai to come down to a founding school in Abu Dhabi called Al Nukba, and it was basically to set up a future skills lab. And this lab would be focusing obviously around stream or STEM education, and that it was kind of separate from the core curriculum itself, but it lends itself to supporting and enhancing the current system that would be inside in schools anyway. So everything was fresh, everything had to be, came from the ground up. you know. So that was kind of where we branched into at the moment.
That's absolutely brilliant. And so far, what has the response been by students engaging with it?
I mean, all stakeholders in general. So the school is only just nearly 2 years old, and we started in the January of that. So we started into a brand new lab, had to flesh out some of the areas in it, and the response from obviously the students itself has been, the engagement levels have just been increasing, based on just kind of their participation within the projects initially, and then to completion of the projects that we've developed so far in numerous fields and numerous kind of subject areas.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I love the fact that you mentioned projects, because I think projects, especially in education, is so important. Having that ability to work with other people to solve one problem is fantastic, because there's even been a report that showed lately that a basic skill like collaborative problem solving is leaving 2.5 trillion US dollars on the table out of productivity. So you can gain, globally, we can gain an extra $2.5 trillion in productivity from one specific skill.
Yeah.
So I think it is really fantastic that STREAM education is focusing on that aspect as well.
Yeah, no, yeah. Absolutely, yeah, 100%. I would agree with you there, and I think it's definitely something that future schools need to be focused on, and that they need to start looking outside just the constraints of their regular curriculum to either incorporate some aspect of that autonomous kind of separate unit that will enhance the actual, nearly the USP of the school, the unique selling point of that school in general, of having these kind of extracurricular or just these focused areas for enhancing the education system currently.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right, because I think a lot of the times schools can get hyper-focused on the core curriculums, and having those additional activities and those additional outlines can be really beneficial as well. Because I feel like, unfortunately, a lot of the time with the core curriculum, the success of a student can be measured by the grades, whether you pass or fail. So I want to understand from your perspective, how would you measure success within a student?
Yeah, it's something, I suppose, you know what, being in education in general, I think you have to be continuously open to changing and also evaluating your own, what you understand. In terms of success, it's a difficult one to, I find anyway, I kind of juggle with every now and then, and it's like, if I'm marking a student specifically to a rubric or to a grading system or to a standardization that's been set not by myself but by either a curriculum that's been set in stone for that school, and yet every student, obviously, one of the biggest difficulties in general when you're a teacher is this differentiation. And trying to design obviously a lesson that's deliverable and received across multiple levels of student and learning. Someone who is at a certain specific level, be it communication skills or being able to actually deliver that material in general, they might deliver a great project to their standard. And I don't like then the fact that if it's assessed to this very strict, rigid, standardized set, they perform low. Whereas, and that's where the thing is with the teacher. Like for me, especially within the STEM field, I have a little bit more flexibility in doing that. I tend to stay away from the numbers and the figures and stuff like that, because they can get, why did you give me 78? Why not 85? And, they look just specifically at that, or the A and the B. Whereas if it's feedback in, relation to an actual verbal, and it's critically analyzing what they've done, and it's being, I suppose, in a kind of a constructive manner, that's far more beneficial. I get there's obviously inside in schools there is, this system has been in place for so long. We went through the system, you went through the system, and it is changing, I feel, and you can slowly see it within these kind of forward-thinking schools.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm so happy that you mentioned the verbal feedback aspect as well, because even when I was a student, I caught myself starting to obsess about the grades that I was getting, especially in the last 2 years of school, because those grades to me would mean that, okay, I would get into the university that I wanted to get into. And also it was kind of just like a target of, okay, I need to get this many points in order to get the scholarship that I wanted.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of like all the assessments were just checklists of like, okay, I just need to remember to do each of these aspects to get the point, but I wasn't really thinking about, wait, why am I actually doing it? Like I lost sight of the bigger picture as to what am I actually meant to be learning in order to achieve it. So yeah, I think having schools which are future focused and forward thinking is absolutely fantastic. And we are seeing more and more schools coming out especially in the UAE. Yeah, I feel like there's so many schools which are forward thinking.
Yeah, and you know what, to speak on that point as well, because I think that's a vital point, and it's not just you, it's me, it's probably a lot of people that are going to be listening to this as well that had that kind of focus on the grade, focus on that, and it was pressure from probably parents or figures in the household as well that were kind of pushing this kind of system on you as well to a certain degree, because that was the system that they grew up in as well. There's a lot of examples that I won't mention them, but there's a lot of friends of mine that didn't do particularly well in the school setting because of that rote learning, or because of just, they didn't engage with it. They couldn't piece together why it was valuable, And some people just had a natural ability to be able to absorb information, and they did well. But now the people that have gone out into the real world and are very good in either communication skills, and they're doing really well now in the world in terms of, now measuring success is a different thing as well. In terms of what's successful for you might not be successful for me. But in terms of how happy they are in general, once they escaped that kind of rigid system, they absolutely exploded in terms of they really found their passion or their meaning, or what really they enjoyed doing. And it wasn't anything to do with the tying of school, but it was more about that core competencies and the skills that he actually needed, or they actually needed in the real world.
Yeah, exactly. And even now, thinking back, reflecting on when I was in school, there were also some subjects that I didn't do particularly well in. And it wasn't necessarily because I couldn't understand or learn the topics, but it was rather I was getting bored in the class.
Yeah.
So that's why the student engagement part is so important. And I remember at the event you were telling us about how you used Legos for a project in school. And I think that would be great to share with the audience.
Yeah, sure. The points there in general is in I'll speak on two things there with that. And one of them was when I was, I was a department lead for the Ministry of Education, and I used to go and visit classrooms of the teachers to observe how their teaching styles were and see what was working, and these and the look at the engagement levels as well. And I decided to go into one of the Arabic lessons just to see what it was like. Now, I'm not fluent in Arabic. I have very little understanding, but I can piece things together. But I sat in the classroom, and as an adult who was there intentionally, my trail of thought was going, because it wasn't engaging to me, because I didn't understand the topic fully, and I wasn't able to engage with that lesson. And that really twisted something in me that I was like, right, it really is, they have to be engaged. And again, the problem with it is, how do you get everybody engaged? And that's the issue that all teachers face in general, is some people might like Lego, some people might not like Lego, but mostly in general we found, and I would say 98% of students like Lego. So it's a fairly safe bet for us. The Lego kits that you have in the schools now is a long way from what we grew up with in Lego in general. Obviously it was just building cars and robots and houses. Now, obviously, they've incorporated coding aspects into it. So it really expanded especially for teaching and learning purposes. One of the projects I did recently was they had to create a burglar alarm system. And the burglar alarm system, basically, I would frame it that you have to protect your house, or you're protecting something. Give them a kind of a brief that's quite general enough that they can have the freedom to come at it in multiple different ways. And they there was motors provided. There was an LED light system that's a clip-in for the Lego actual components. And they had to construct most of them went for a kind of a simple house or a car. And they have to build in then those skills that they would have learned in Scratch coding or in the ICT classes also, to bring it all together as one project. So by giving them that kind of brief, it allowed them to plan, to design, and then to actually implement everything that they did. And with the Lego, you have the freedom to make it look like whatever you want.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. And I think that's absolutely brilliant, especially just giving an assignment brief that allows the students to be creative and to think from any aspect possible, because I think that's how you truly start that critical thinking process, and it makes it interesting, especially as a teacher. If you're marking the project, you see a bunch of different ideas that you may not have thought of before. And I think that's something that's also really important, is not to lose that childlike curiosity.
Yeah. 100%.
And that's something that I think we should all have, because asking the why, the hows, and seeing how something actually works, to me especially, that's fascinating. I love doing that sort of stuff. But yeah, I absolutely love that Lego project that you did within the school.
Yeah. I think like you what you said there in relation to, I think the biggest thrill for me, especially when I would design either more complicated projects or if there's an entrepreneurial aspect to it, is when the students really engage with it. And you mentioned there that like they come up with ideas that I didn't think of. And excuse me, sometimes as the teacher, we think we have all the answers, or we should have all the answers. That's obviously not the case all the time, and we have to Google stuff as well. But the students, some of them, especially at those younger levels, their levels of creativity, they think in ways that we don't think like anymore, or that we've lost because of the systems that we came up with and that we were in. And we didn't have that freedom to explore. We had that fear of failure. We had that don't go beyond the line. Just do what you need to do, get your points, go to college, do this. And it's changing completely now. The world outside in terms of work is completely changing.
Yeah.
So we need to change as well with it in the education systems.
Exactly, because also another report showed that 85% of the jobs that are going to exist in 2030 don't even exist yet. So it's a thing of the rapid change, and the pace of technology right now is crazy. ChatGPT got launched in November of 2022. Where now, as of February, they've got 400 million active weekly users. So the adoption rate of that is absolutely insane, and we're just at like the entrance points of what AI can do. And yeah, I want to pick up on the point that you brought up of the fear of failure. That is something that I also feel very strongly about, because I feel like traditionally the education system, failure was typically the end all or be all if you were to fail an assessment. And I think it's so important to have that aspect where you can truly be like, okay, if I fail, it's fine because I'm still going to learn from it. And then you're able to move forward and fail forward, or at least that's what my dad always told me, is fail forward. If you keep trying long enough, you'll make enough mistakes to realize what not to do, and then you'll get it right eventually. So,
Smart man.
Yeah. But yeah, it's brilliant. And I want to focus on the mismatch between the workplace and school. Where do you see the biggest misalignment?
Again, most of these times, I think I find the discussions in general around if there's a thing that I'm having a problem with or I'm struggling with in general, talking to other educators has been a phenomenal, I suppose, reflective experience. And I think most educators, sometimes they can be quite closed off because they feel like they're very protective of their own materials and stuff. But when they start sharing and they open up about different things, it definitely it can help. So like for me, when I look back at jobs that weren't in school or when I was in my other careers in general, I think when I look at it, communication is probably one of the biggest things in general. If you can communicate your ideas across in a very efficient and effective manner, it can be very it brings that purpose and meaning to what you're trying to do. So like I think trying to build those skills into it in general into school is going to be vitally important. Other areas then like would be maybe financial literacy. This is something that I found was quite lacking inside in schools. Now there are a few companies in general that are focusing on that area, but it is something that when I left school, it wasn't something that I was hyper aware of. It was like put the money in the bank, leave it there. Now there's so many opportunities for investment opportunities. You've cryptocurrencies. The world that the students are going into now is a completely different place. So, they need to know about these things because that's the work environments and these are the places that they're going to end up working in general. So the mismatch between, I suppose, what we're learning in the schools in general, there's still a gap between them and it needs to be bridged based on what the realities are now.
Yeah. Exactly. And I'm so happy that you mentioned skills, because right now with AI and the internet, the knowledge is already out there. Anyone, if they choose to, can go and do self-led learning, but it's teaching the skills of how to, first of all, comprehend the information that you're reading, how to differentiate what applies to your situation, what doesn't, and then lastly, what do you actually do with that information? Because you can read 100 books, but if you're not able to apply that knowledge, then what have you really gained from it?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And the point that you had there in terms of like, do you ever read a book yourself and you have to read the chapter maybe 2 or 3 times, especially if it's quite a complicated topic, and it just takes one person sometimes, usually like, this is the whole thing of teaching, is it takes one person to rephrase that in a way that you're like, that's it. Yeah. And it just clicks and it flows into much easier, and you're like, right, now I get it. And it just takes that one person to that key just to be able to explain it in a way that is completely with what kind of your understanding of it is in general then after that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's happened to me before a lot of the times with books, but also specifically with math. I remember for my end of year assessment in school, we had to do this long math report and we had to use specific equations, and I just did not understand it. So I was performing quite poorly in math, but then ended up getting a tutor, and he just explained it to me once using a different method that was taught by the teacher, and then I was like, this makes sense. And then I ended up getting the highest grade I ever got in math after just understanding it in a different way.
Yeah.
So that's why I think that personalization of learning is so important.
Did you solve that question in that way in front of the teacher?
I did it because it was in the report. So then I explained my working and everything out. I ended up showing it to the teacher.
Yeah.
She read it the first time and she was like, no, but you didn't follow the correct methodology. And then I was like, this was a very satisfying moment for me. I was like, no, well, actually, if you look at this links in over here, and then this and this, and then that's how I got to my final answer. And it was like, oh, okay. And then,
And that's kind of one of the things as well, is like, I noticed that when I was in school in general is, if you did something slightly different, and especially in the maths, because obviously there was numerous ways to get to the one answer, they taught you one way.
Yep.
And yet there might have been a simpler way, or a way that you better understood it. And if you did it, the automatic response usually was what you just said, which was, no, that's not the way that I was taught. That's not the way I'm teaching you. You have to do it my way, because that's the way I learned it and that's the way I understand it.
Yeah.
So, and that's the whole thing of trying to build that understanding in different ways.
Exactly. And that's where the collaborative problem solving comes in for me as well, because once you're actually working in a team and you can see all the different ways that other people would approach a problem, then you can actually sit there, have a discussion, and then you're going to be able to tackle problems like you've never tackled them before, because you're getting all of this insight instead of working alone. And it's like, if you want to go fast, then you can go alone. But if you want to go far, then you need to go with a team, because everyone has different strengths and all of those strengths complement each other. And then you're able to do so much more.
You were talking about the mismatch thingy again.
Yeah.
You just mentioned collaboration. Like, as a teacher in general, obviously we talk about different styles of teaching and so on like that, and it's like group work obviously is something that's it's common. It's something that always happens, but in general, when you think of education, it's quite an individual thing. And we were talking about earlier on with this, like, your focus was like this. Your focus is just get my points and continue, and if I didn't get a B, I need to get my A in the next one and stuff. And it's very individual. You're the one who feels the pressure in it, whereas this is that gap. You work in an environment most of the time, not by yourself, but you work in a space that's collaborative, that people are asking you questions, or you're problem solving as a group or as a team, and you might have a team leader that guides the flow of that piece. But these are things then that aren't as emphasized and pushed inside in the school. Yes, they have group work activities, but it's very much nearly like, sometimes it can be a tick the box thingy, or sometimes it is just like, right, we're going to do this in group, because sometimes it's an easier thing to do it in a group. But the area then would be that it should be something that is completely encouraged and made more kind of fluid in the systems that we have currently, because it is literally a part of everyday work for most people.
Yeah, exactly. And working with people is so important, especially having the emotional intelligence. That's another thing that I believe is very crucial to develop and learn. And then also, the collaborative problem solving. And I feel like now with the internet, you're never really solving a problem completely on your own, because if you're busy working on something, you're going to go on Google, look at what other people have tried,
Yeah.
and then indirectly you're already working with other people.
Yeah, it's a good point. I suppose the space has been opened up.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I think, especially for me in school, I have to admit I never enjoyed group work because I was typically the person who ended up doing all of the work.
Yeah, that is a problem.
So, but yeah, I think that collaborative problem solving is just so important. And then I want to talk a bit about innovation now as well. Do you think in the classroom, innovation is more about the mindset that the teacher can bring into it, or about the tools that the teacher can use?
So, like for me, and I'm going to go back to that same kind of point that I made earlier on, which was about the Lego. Innovation in Lego has been huge. I mean, it was fantastic when we were growing up in general. Now, it wasn't in the schools, really. I don't remember playing with Lego in school. I remember playing with Lego at home. But maybe they should have brought in parts of it to the curriculum at the time, or used it in a creative manner. But with the introduction and addition of all of the electronic components and the coding aspect as well, that's innovative in its approach. And that's out in the last few years, really, where that's kind of really picked up, and now there's competitions around it. So when you talk about like the tools that we use, this innovative technology has been phenomenal in terms of what its ability to bring it into the classroom, in terms of project-based learning, and in terms of going through that design cycle of finding out what your brief is or your problem, and then getting them to design something specifically around that. And then, so what was the full part of the question?
Do you think that innovation is more about the mindset or the tools that you bring into the classroom?
I genuinely don't know what the full answer to that would be, because I think it's they're so vital, both of them. And I think like having an innovative mindset, like for me, and one of the first things I was teaching was when I was teaching the incoming teachers, was what's the difference between creativity and innovation? And a lot of them didn't actually know what the difference was, because they piled them together. Creativity was this kind of ethereal thought process. You're coming up with new ideas, and the innovation side was the practical side of bringing those kind of visions into a kind of a practical and representative way. So I think having an innovative mindset is also something, it's vital as well, and it's something that needs to be nurtured and also developed inside in schools. So I don't know if I could choose just one.
Yeah, no, I agree with you as well, because I think my answer would be it's a combination of the two, because having that innovative mindset is ultimately what's going to drive you to go and try new things, and to bring those new tools that you haven't necessarily used before in a class, but seeing something like, that's an interesting concept, let's try it out, let's see how the students respond to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important, because I also feel like a lot of the time with innovation, people think of something that's tangible, like a brand new software that you can use, or like the new Lego, but it can also be your thought processes. How you think of different situations, I think that can be innovative as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then how do you balance that innovation with the curriculum standards?
It's a balancing act, I guess, in fairness. Luckily enough, in the school that I'm currently in, the Future Skills Hub is, as I said, is slightly separate from the core curriculum, and what we're trying to do is enhance what's going on. So I'm not taking time from the teachers' schedules. I'm not. I'm really supporting them in as much as I can, and trying to be innovative. So we talked about this innovative tooling and technology that's being used. We've incorporated robotics to teach tectonic plates. Was one of the projects that we did recently, and it was basically we had two robots working in opposites, and when they were programmed to come together, it would form, the paper that was merged between them would form a mountain, or if it was pulled apart, it might form a valley. And you're talking about just the shifting tectonic plates in general, and that was used to enhance what they were doing inside in their geography classes in that side. So. Luckily enough, in that school, they have created an autonomous space for us as educators to have that freedom, that we're not like leaning on their curriculum too much. And I think that's not the case in all the schools. There's a certain kind of rigidity and like lack of flexibility sometimes in schools, where they're still tied very much to that maybe that like older style system that's in place, where they don't have the freedom, or they're constrained by time, that they can only do a certain thing for a certain amount of time because of they need to move on to the next chapter, they need to move on to the next topic. Whereas fortunately our school is quite forward thinking, and it doesn't take from anything. If anything, it's just building.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because we've also had many conversations with teachers where they feel restricted by the curriculum standards, because they have to prepare the students for the standardized assessments. So obviously the lessons are going to have to reflect that as well. And that's where I think that it's also quite sad, and I feel bad for the teachers who really want to go in and innovate, but then they're restricted by the curriculum standards. And unfortunately, that's the way that it is. We are seeing some more progress as well. And there are more and more teachers now who are finding those creative methods to teach the material required while still being aligned with the curriculum standards.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, a part of my master's thesis, I did a survey of schools in the UAE, and it was about teacher retention and turnover. And the statistics were significant. Some schools had 50% teacher turnover rates. Now, there's a lot of factors, obviously, that influence that piece. And it was some of the factors, obviously, were the fact that it's quite a transient country in general. Obviously, you have its majority of its population is expatriate. So they're coming over here for either smaller contracts, or they're coming over here on a rolling contract and then decide to leave. So the turnover is quite high, maybe possibly for that reason, but not that reason alone. And you mentioned again that autonomy. Autonomy was one of the factors that got highlighted by numerous teachers in relation to if autonomy was reduced and they felt quite restricted or constrained by a curriculum, their level of motivation was affected. Their level of want to do the job in general also was affected by it. And some teachers, after a few years of being in the service after graduating and being in the service for 5 to 10 years, decided to completely change career path and go into something that they felt they had a bit more creative freedom or a bit more autonomy in general. So it's such a huge aspect, and sometimes it can be possibly overlooked, that autonomy is, for me, having moved from a role where it was a leadership role and going into, the reason I said, yeah, I'll leave that role and jump down to Abu Dhabi to start up this new Future Skills Hub, was the fact that I was in the interview, it was autonomy. I was given the freedom that others weren't given. And my level of motivation rose significantly. My I suppose, passion for the career in general and what I do has only increased over the last year and a half, because of I can see what we're doing is impacting the students in a positive way. And even from the feedback that we've gotten from parents as well, it's been nothing but supportive and going, I wish we had this in school.
Yeah. And I think, autonomy is crucial, because having that freedom to make your own decisions and to make your own judgments as to what is best for your class, it gives the teachers a lot more pride in their work, because it's a piece of your own passion that you're handing out to the students. It's not just following a curriculum standard spreadsheet that's been given out and you're not regurgitating information to the students. Yeah. So I think autonomy is so important. And then also, I'm curious, from the research that you've done, would you also say that workload was one of the factors as well for the turnover?
Yeah, it was. It was a significant one. So some of the key factors that were highlighted across multiple schools was workload as well. The pressure that's put on in certain schools on the teachers. Teachers, they give so much. And if they're really, like most people in general, if you ask teachers in general, why did you go into education? It's never for money, really. It's for passion. It's for something that you love to do. And it's very pure, and it's unfortunate that it's the one career that the turnover rate is so high, and it's gotten worse. As in, if I look back in Ireland and I look at England in general, the the amount of people that are going into education has decreased. And the people that are, because they're realizing that it's quite a difficult career path to go into. And again, obviously, you have salary expectations are a little bit different from going into corporate or industry work as well. So there's a lot of factors that would affect that the teachers' levels of kind of, I suppose, motivation and want to do what they do and give everything to it. You mentioned about, and I thought that was a beautiful phrase, a piece of passion. Yeah, teachers give pieces of themselves continuously. Like at the end of a term, when you go into any school, the teachers are drained. They are drained and they are ready to go on holidays and just completely disconnect. And that was the case for the spring break. Everyone at the end of it is just like, I can turn off for a while. My brain is so active. You're constantly going. And you have 26 to 28 people in front of you that you have to constantly engage with, constantly, just support. And it's quite a demanding role. So you can see why there's a lot of pressure on them and why they feel that the workload is significant. And maybe the reward sometimes isn't there.
Yeah, because I feel like it's not just traditional labor in terms of it being mentally draining from an information standpoint and the planning and everything, but it's also emotionally draining, as you said, of having that ability to go in there and support all of the students. Because even with some of the teachers we had some amazing teachers where on the days where they were perhaps not doing their best, they still came to school and they gave their 100%.
Yeah.
And those were the teachers which had the biggest impact on us.
Yeah.
And I feel like the workload is quite tricky, especially here in the UAE, because you've got the standards you need to meet of the international curriculum that's taught within the school. But then you also have the Ministry of Education or KHDA standards that you have to prepare for. And especially during the assessment periods and then the inspection periods as well. That's where, as a student, we could see the visible stress on the teachers. And from talking to teachers now, it's the preparation for the inspections alongside marking all of the students' assessments because, it's crazy. They've got 28 students that they need to mark, on average taking about 30 minutes, depending on the length of the assignment. It's just adding hours and hours of work onto them.
Yeah.
And most of the time it's done outside of school.
There was a very funny piece that it was an analogy that I saw, and it'll stem to what you just said. It was a relational piece between, let's say, corporate jobs and what a teacher does, and it was basically putting it that a teacher was asking like, "Oh, what's my next meeting?" And it was basically you have a meeting here with a client, and each person has a specific want and need, and it was. There's so much that they have to do to be able to, like, for example, in this hour you have a meeting here. The next one you have is in an hour's time with a new topic, with a new group of people, and you have to make a presentation for that. And each piece, like when you fill it out, like as if it's a calendar that you'd have in the corporate world or the industry world, it was like no one would do that. No one would do that job. But that's what the expectation is on teachers.
Yeah. And a lot of people, I don't feel completely understand the workload on teachers because they see teaching as a job as like, oh, you've got these fantastic holidays.
Yeah.
It's like, well, the teachers have the fantastic holidays because of the work that they're doing during that period.
Yeah.
And that's our mission at School AI is to focus on the assessments for the time being, to reduce the time the teachers have to spend on assessments while giving them the ability to have more individualized feedback, that teachers can actually focus more on the students as well, because that human connection that you have with the students is so important.
Yeah, I think, like, again, speaking on that workload, I went through a phase of corrections only in last term as well. I decided to do presentations with the students, and you come up with a rubric for it and stuff, but the amount of time, it's just very consuming. And it's, at the end of any academic term, teachers are they're so focused on trying to get all of these assessments completed, markings done, and anything, especially with this now AI being such a, it's just the speed at which it's being rolled out. But it's so useful. I found it very useful inside in the schools to be more efficient in my own work, be it for lesson planning, for checking on ideas, for, I might have a few ideas myself and then I'll refine it using AI. It's nearly like having a personal assistant in the classroom. So the fact that Skull AI is bringing that to an assessment part of it, that's where a lot of teachers spend most of their time.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, AI has so much potential within education because the amount of tasks that you can optimize with it when you're working with AI and you're able to give it the knowledge and the context that you need to give it, you can save so much time and so much energy to be able to go back into the classroom and understand the students better, because data is great. There's a lot of things that you can see from data, but then also the teacher's observation is so important. The things that you can't really measure is so crucial. So having that ability to blend the human touch with AI as well, I think will make a huge impact within education.
Yeah, 100%. Look, I mean, we're in the middle of adopting a new AI policy anyway within the school, and it's being developed currently, and it's something that will be ongoing. You know, it's gonna change based on how fast AI is changing in general, and the new platforms that are being adopted and trialed inside in these schools. You know, so I mean, there's even initially when it first came out, I was blown away. I realized the potential impact that this was going to have on the teachers. And I put together quickly. It was the first one that we used was obviously ChatGPT, and I put together a quick slide of just I was amazed by it, and some of the teachers didn't really understand how useful this was going to be. So I think like it's just teachers in general, they need to engage with it, and some people might be afraid of the fact that it would, I don't need it. I know I'm fine, but it's like, if it can take 5, 10, 20, 30 minutes off your time of doing things, that's time that you have with either your family or your friends or in the real world,
Exactly. Yeah, and I 100% agree. And I think everyone should be engaging with AI more and more, even if it's just for like simple tasks, because that's where you start to understand how AI works, and it will start being beneficial in your own personal life for the aspects that you want to use it in. Because, I mean, I use AI every single day, especially with ChatGPT, the feature where you can have a conversation with it.
Yeah.
When I'm thinking of ideas or potential workflows of something, I will just put it on the conversation mode, and then I'll just be in my room talking for about half an hour with an AI. I might look absolutely crazy, but then afterwards I've got all of these new ideas and it learns from you as well. So everything that you put into it, it starts to understand you more and more and more, and then your responses start getting better suited for your needs.
So there's a beautiful thing, and there's two points in it, one for students and one for teachers. Some teachers, they don't like admitting that they don't know something, right? So I had written an article at one point which was specifically about using AI as a mentor. And it was basically about you could be in meetings with senior leadership, or you could be in meetings in general with a group of teachers, and they might be talking about something that's within your remit or your wheelhouse, and you kind of fully don't really understand it, but you'll stay quiet, and because you don't want to be seen as incompetent, and yet it gives those people who are either a little bit shy or reserved in that maybe a little bit of a boost or a bit of kind of comfort in knowing that I can go away, find out an answer, converse with the AI, really understand it, ask them to break it down. They can ask and repeat it multiple times, and then we kind of go, okay, I get it now. And then the next time that they're in that conversation, they can go, actually, you know what, I agree with this point or that point, because they are more confident in it now. So it can be used as that kind of crutch to support growth, personal growth and personalized growth for the teachers as well. And it's the same for the students. Like, how many times were you in class and the teacher asked the question and you're about probably 80% sure, 75% sure, but you didn't put up your hand because you're like, it's that fear.
Yep.
And yet now you have students who have iPads and access to these technologies, and they can kind of go, I think I know the answer. Let me double check. And they've no problem communicating with the AI because it's a digital platform.
Exactly.
There's none of that hesitation. So it would remove that barrier. So when you talk about that personalization of education, that's the route that it needs to be going down. And that's why these AI platforms like yours is going to be, filling these areas.
Yeah, and Exactly. I think the potential that AI has for students is also brilliant because it gives students the ability to go home and learn on their own. And to me, at least, also with AI, it gives me the access to fulfill my curiosity. So any question that I have, I can go in there, I can ask it. And even if it's a complex topic, I can just say, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. And then we'll start breaking it down simply. And then you learn the foundation. And then you can go into this deep rabbit hole of complex ideas. And then you truly start to understand the concept. So I think it's going to be absolutely brilliant for students in the future.
Yeah, I agree. Now, there's obviously, we were in the middle of, so part of the AI committee inside in the school, and it's very much focused on safeguarding. And it's just one of those things as well. We have to make the students aware that it's not 100% accurate. You have these hallucinations, as they say in AI, and it's like, if you ask a question, it will always give you an answer. And it's like, fact checking. And obviously when you're dealing with these platforms in general, safeguarding in terms of students' names and these things have to be protected. Yeah. So it has to be either generated in a kind of a legend or some kind of a system to make sure that it's at least safe. Because you need to make sure that you're dealing with a school, you're dealing with students, and it's one of those areas that's been highlighted continuously that fact check. And again, all the universities are doing it as well in the same thing, because they've obviously been impacted by AI as well. You have people writing assignments and assessments, and there's no real way to fully, because you can humanize the text or whatever it is, but it's about being honest, and being human is going to be one of the biggest things. You talked about different job roles and stuff. Human AI relations, is that going to be something that we're going to have to consider later down the line? And so it's a very interesting one.
Yeah, I think definitely a big job in the future would be to do with the ethics around AI as well, because as you mentioned, with the safeguarding of student information, that's absolutely important. And that's crucial because ultimately AI, a lot of the conversations like ChatGPT that you have, it does use that data in its database to improve itself over time. So safeguarding the student information, 100% agree with. And then also fact checking, because AI does hallucinate. I remember in the early stages with ChatGPT, you could convince it that 2 + 2 = 3. So with enough persistence, you'd be able to tell it that 2 + 2 = 3, and then from then on, it would keep giving you that answer.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so important. And I think the training data on AI should be specific to the sector that you're using it for.
Yeah.
So that's why I also think there's going to be an increase of having sector-specific AI agents who's been trained on specific knowledge. Maybe even for each company or each school would have their own AI that's trained on the specific knowledge or curriculum, for example, because that's ultimately where AI is going to be the most powerful.
Yeah. So I mean, I'll give you a quick example. Was I feel like I love technology. It's like, it's something that I've always had a passion about in general. So when I see something that's engaging, that's new, I have to dive straight into it. So when I started in the school in general, I was trying to make what I was doing more efficient. So obviously I was using ChatGPT, and so when you have you have school values and ethos and all of these documents that you have belong to a school, I decided that I would create basically a chatbot that would just specifically focus on the material that I wanted it to focus on, and about the values that we're trying to embed of future learners and these things. So for lesson creation, it understood the prompt that I would want to have, or at least the structure and the frames that were more appropriate and more aligned with this vision for the school.
Yeah, exactly. And that's brilliant that you've done that, because I feel like a lot of times people get slightly put off with AI when the first time they go into a chat, they don't get the immediate response that they want or the response that they expect. But also now that's where the skills learning comes from, where you have to be able to learn how to communicate with AI. So you have to be very specific. And I've learned this over time now, where you've got to mention every single point that you want, and you can't really make assumptions, because otherwise the AI is going to make the assumptions for you.
Yeah.
So that prompt engineering is so important when it comes to getting the desirable output that you want from AI.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one to teach, especially to the younger generations in general. You have, for example, trying to get the younger students to understand what AI is in general is, if they have a question, what is the sun or something simple, but you get a student to ask 10 of their colleagues, they'll all give a slightly different variation of the answer. And that's exactly what you would do if you put in a prompt into an AI platform like ChatGPT. The response will always be slightly different, and that's like talking to a human. So
Exactly.
like it's trying to create that understanding of whatever you ask it will give something slightly different, but it will give more than likely a full definition of what the answer is.
Yeah, exactly. And also part of me thinks that is actually great, because then now it would also be a bit boring if every single AI gave exactly the same answer.
For sure.
And especially when it's something that you're using for personal use, you want it to kind of line up with your specific needs. So it's like with my business partner, Alex, if I look and use his ChatGPT, it's going to be completely different to what mine is.
Yeah.
So because I use mine for a lot more coding stuff, mine will come out with a prompt in codes. His will come out again in bullet points, breaking everything down.
Yeah.
I think that's great, because once again, it's personalized.
Yeah, personalized. Yeah, and
Yeah.
this is the whole thing of what education needs to be more in line with. It needs to be more personalized. The whole thing of this, like, the toughest part is differentiation.
Yep.
How do you teach 28 students the same topic and try to, you kind of hear sometimes of this, the leveling systems that teachers would use, which would be like trying to aim at the higher level achievers, medium and low. But, in reality, it is quite a difficult thing to get right. And
Yeah.
it's constantly changing most of the time.
Yeah, exactly. Because that also reminds me of when we were in school in the revision period for final exams. The differentiation that we got was just the teacher going through the core subjects of the curriculum for that specific class, and then just highlighting the points that we need to work on for each student.
Yeah.
So that was the differentiation we got. And then we would have to sit in the class, and then we'd just go through the textbook, revising everything.
Yeah.
Because also I feel like even if you group all the high performers together, or some high performers, low performers, they don't all learn the same.
No.
Like, they've got the performance in common maybe, but the way that they learn and process things are completely different.
Yeah, and this was really highlighted during COVID. I was asked and tasked to lead an online learning library for the Ministry of Education at the time, and it was focusing around STEM, but it was the subject of creative design and innovation. And basically, we had to compile, or there was teachers, all the teachers were involved in this, that they did a tremendous amount of work and effort went into it, but they created this online video library where they would deliver materials. And also then there was self-paced micro-learning sessions that were for the professional development of teachers during the time, because everything obviously was online at the time.
Yeah.
So everything was very rapid, very quick, and it was pumped out onto these platforms, these learning management systems. And, what we found was that in general, when you give the teachers a little bit more autonomy in terms of what they're learning, or you give them a little bit of choice around the learning, when they felt like they were more comfortable and it wasn't prescribed to a time, you had to do it at between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, you had to do this. If you had, you go home sometimes, and if you sometimes feel comfortable enough, you had your cup of tea or whatever, you've had your dinner, and you're kind of like, you know what, I'm going to turn on the laptop there and I'm going to do half an hour. The ability to be able to jump on and do a kind of a micro learning session. And for me personally as well, I'm constantly doing like LinkedIn courses or professional development courses that are there from Google or from other aspects, especially around AI. The ability to be able to jump on, watch a video for 10, 15 minutes, and then do a little quiz afterwards, and then jump on to the next section. You know what? I've had enough today. Close it. To control your learning and personalize it has been huge. And that's that sector that's growing huge at the moment as well within education.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely brilliant. And I love the fact about the autonomy to choose when you learn, because I feel like, especially with myself, there's many different courses and that I'm want to get into and want to start learning, or there's so many topics that interest me. But instead of following a rigid schedule of, okay, at this time every day I'm going to learn this thing, I kind of set myself a goal that I want to achieve, but then when I feel inspired to do that specific thing, then that's when I'll hop into it. Because I feel like when you get that moment of inspiration of, I feel like doing this now, then that's absolutely brilliant, because that's when you're more engaged with it.
Yeah.
And of course, there's work that I have to do that you have to set a deadline and you have to do it at specific times. But for learning, I think it's best to do it in the moments when you feel the most inspired to go and do it.
It's when you're at your most receptive.
Yeah.
When it's something that you want, and it's willed. There was an example. One of my colleagues, his son, came up to him, and he was singing this song, and it was 5 plus 5 is 10, 8 plus 2 is 10, 7 plus 3 is 10, and he's only young. He's like 4 years old or 5 years old, and he knew that he didn't teach him that, and he said, where did you learn this? And he learned it from his iPad that he has. Now he gets access to it in a controlled manner, because the dad is quite restrictive sometimes on the amount of technology exposure, and it's kind of a balancing act. But he learned it from a YouTube video, and it was number blocks or one of these things. But he asked him, and he broke down, do you understand what you're saying, or are you just repeating a song? And when he actually analysed what it was, the kid knew what he was actually saying and the meaning behind what he was doing. So, and he did this by himself. He did this, and he was just scrolling around, and he was picking things. He has obviously educational games on it as well. And it was because it was his own time. He was in his own space, and he absorbed it.
Yeah, and I think that's an absolutely amazing example, because I feel like even as a kid myself, if someone told me it's like, no, we have to do this at this specific time, like at home, it's like, no, but I want to do this assignment or something else instead. And then you go into doing it, you sort of have that resentment towards it of like, I don't want to be doing this right now, but I have to do it. Versus when you just like, I think I'm going to focus on algebra, for example, now. It's like, okay, then you're going to be more receptive. And talking about the exposure of technology to kids, it's a wonderful thing, but it's also scary how fast they learn technology.
Oh, yeah.
It's insane. Like, I feel like punishment as a kid was, you're not allowed to go outside anymore. Nowadays, it's a lot more of like, no, please go play outside.
Yeah. And you know what? I had a discussion with my colleague and close friend as well, and it was around. Sometimes even, especially with the generation of teachers that I would come from, it's like, we're kind of trying to restrict sometimes the technology, because that's not how we learned. Like, if you think about how you learned in general, most of the time mine was writing down, and that's how I get my information, even for, just taking notes on things, and I would highlight them. And, when we were in school, it was pages of highlighted material. And as a teacher, I have to kind of unlearn sometimes the way that I learned, because with that kind of like, oh no, they shouldn't be on iPads, they shouldn't be on, reduce the amount of technology. Sometimes you hear this a lot sometimes, but you know what? The way that they're a completely different generation.
Yep.
Their learning style is not the way that we learned. It's completely different, and it's evolving continuously over the generations. They pick up stuff so quickly now, and they're a technology, they're brought up within the technology. So of course that's their natural method of learning, let's just say.
Yeah.
That's where they absorb the information so quickly. And again, it's in their own pace, or it's in their own time and stuff like that, which also helps with the kind of soaking in of the knowledge.
Yeah, definitely. And I really like the point that you brought up of unlearning a skill, because I think that's also something that can be very valuable to do from time to time. If you've learned how to do something in a specific way, sometimes unlearning it and then learning a new approach can be really beneficial.
Yeah, 100%.
So, yeah. And then I just want to ask you, what's one habit you believe that every teacher should start implementing every day?
One habit. I mean, for me personally, I think it's just never stop questioning to a certain degree, as in it's always be inquisitive. Question even why you're doing something. Question, is that the best way for me to do it? Be open to change, especially in a world that is quite dynamic in general. And it's especially as an educator, I think you just don't be closed. always question, is this the correct, or is this the most appropriate, or is this the most efficient way to do something?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely great. And then also, what's one sentence you would use to describe your vision of education?
Vision of education. I mean, for me, what I would like to see in terms of education is that it's more personalized, focused on giving a little bit more autonomy to the people that are dedicating themselves to teaching. Because with that, they bring so much passion into it. So I feel that passionate education delivery comes from teachers who have that freedom and autonomy to deliver in a specific way, unconstrained from restrictive assessments or that kind of stuff. Whereas if they were focused more on the stuff that's actually needed when you get out into the workplace, and focusing and developing those core skills and bringing them into their classrooms in any capacity that they see fit, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And I think my answer would be that schools should create adaptable creators, not compliant memorizers.
Yeah, for
So
sure. Yeah.
having that adaptability aspect in there, that the students are prepared for no matter what they encounter in the future.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for this conversation. It's been absolutely fantastic. I hope that the audience has gained something out of this. I certainly have. And thank you so much for your time today.
You're most welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.